Player 3 is joining the game this summer. I've always known that I wanted to be a mom, but my road to motherhood was not what I thought it would be. It involved blood draws, x-rays, pills, injections, and endless ultrasounds, and negative test after negative test. And through all of this, I was constantly being asked questions by well-intentioned people like, so when are you having kids? Do you have any kids? And any big announcements coming soon? Every time these questions were asked, my heart would break over and over again. Unexplained infertility is a joy stealer. It's a journey of uncertainty. Will it happen this cycle? Next cycle? Will it ever happen? It was as though I was walking through a desert, and every month I would see the oasis ahead of me, only for it to fade away again and again. It can be an incredibly isolating journey. I watched as seemingly everyone around us got pregnant with ease. I celebrated with friends as they brought their babies into this world, all the while wondering when it would finally be my turn. But I also learned that I was not alone in this journey.
In this episode of the Her Fertility Podcast, we hear from Kelsey, a client who I supported through her experience with unexplained infertility and multiple IUI procedures. Kelsey and I worked together on regulating her nervous system, working with her subconscious mind that was full of fear and doubt, and today she is pregnant and expecting her first baby later this year.
I want to give a huge shout out to Fertility Jess, who helped me discover myself on a whole new level and who was one of our biggest cheerleaders. And of course, my incredible husband, who never allowed my beacon of hope to fully go out.
That means so much. Thank you.
Now I've got us both crying before we record the video.
That's great. That's what this is all for.
I knew in my logical brain that for a woman of my age that it could take up to 12 months for a healthy couple, yada, yada, yada. But there was just this like gut feeling that it wasn't happening for a reason, especially seeing all of the people around me who had gotten pregnant fairly quickly and fairly easily. So, after about 9 months, I asked my doctor for a referral, and she kind of reluctantly gave me the referral, but gave it to me nonetheless. And I started going through, all of the tests and procedures and everything that you have to go through to get to the point where you can actually start receiving fertility treatments. Just after the 1 year mark that we got our first IUI, which failed. We had a couple of other cycles that also failed. And it was actually around the time that we started the actual fertility treatments that I finally bucked up the courage to reach out to Jess. And we started doing the one-on-one consultations. And I was even a little bit hesitant to honestly start working with Jess just because I consider myself to be a bit of a skeptic when it comes to like the energetic side of things. But I was willing at that point to just try it. It was one of those, it couldn't hurt, but it could help sort of things. And my God, I could not be happier that I reached out. The very first consultation that we had together, we did a grounding exercise to finish out the consultation. And I just remember doing the visualization practice, and there were just tears streaming down my face through that whole visualization. And I just knew that I was in the right place. I knew that this was a journey that I was supposed to be going on. I knew that this was work that I needed to do. And through the work that we did together, I got to really feel in tune with my body more, feel in tune with my energies more. And I still consider myself to be somewhat of a skeptic in that realm, but I couldn't deny the like mind body connection that I was feeling in the sessions. And I couldn't be happier that I decided to bring her on board.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. So something you said was like the courage that it took to work with me. Can you speak to that a little bit more? Was
Yeah.
it worth taking that leap of faith?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I think that it was courageous because we hadn't shared our fertility journey with anyone at that point. And so this was something that my partner and I were struggling through together on our own. So, like at that point, I think that's why I chose that word courageous because it is nerve-wracking to, you know, feel like the internet has created like such weird relationship spaces for us. And so that like taking that leap of reaching out and saying like, hey, I know that you work in this space. I've been struggling with this. And just like that vulnerability of also like you being the first person that we told that we were on this journey, um, was like where that vulnerability was coming from.
Yeah, it is such a bravery. I think that's the thing that means the most is like the level of trust that people place in this. So thank you. You mentioned your partner, who I feel like was a little more skeptical than you
Oh
were,
yeah. Yeah. Very much so.
which is fine. How did this help the dynamic between you guys?
I tended to take a much more pessimistic point of view in this journey of like every time that I got my period every month, I was like, like, when is it gonna happen? But he always remained much more optimistic of like, there's always next cycle and um it'll happen when it's supposed to happen to us and like that kind of mindset. And so we were very much on like opposite sides of things in that regard. But working with you and working through this journey helped me to pull out of that pessimism a little bit more. That coincided with when we were starting to get the actual treatments. I started to pull more out of that pessimistic side of things and started to believe him a little bit more when he was saying, we'll get there and all that kind of stuff. So it helped us to get more on the same page.
Yeah, great. And that is something that's unique about your journey. So you had done IUI before we worked together, and then you had IUI when we were working together. How
Mhm.
were those experiences different?
I think it might have been the first failed IUI that really
Yeah.
like pushed me to finally reach out because I don't think that I was at the point where I could reach out for that help just yet. But then being in the thick of it and actually like having an IUI and having it fail, I think was the straw that broke the camel's back and made me finally go, okay, I need some assistance here. And so, yeah, the first IUI, I was definitely very excited to finally be at that point in my journey. And then, of course, really disappointed when it didn't work. Having the sessions with you and having those really that dedicated time to myself, like that was more of it than anything else, like more than the energy work, more than anything else. It was really just like having that time and that space dedicated to just talking it out with another human who was much more impartial than my husband was and who just like especially with you someone who had been on that journey of fertility and all of the life that happens when you're still on your infertility journey that really helped me get through those cycles where things weren't quite going right and just like maintain that hope of like okay the next cycle is going to be a really good one sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm curious, like in your own words, because what I do here is support you in its most basic sense. Okay? And we're going into a lot of different layers of what that looks like, and everybody's journey is different. So I'm curious if you were to put it in your own words, what working with me as your fertility doula is like.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I got out of it really was just knowing that I was talking to someone in that space who got it. And even that, like, I think working with you and working with a therapist at the same time was a really interesting contrast. Um, because my therapist, she's great and I love her. But there was a lot of explaining that I had to do when I was in my sessions with her. Like I couldn't just, throw out IUI or, all these different terms. Whereas when I was speaking with you, we were just speaking the same language. And so I think that element of just like talking with a friend who understood it so deeply just made all of the difference.
Yeah, that's rad. What was your favorite part about the work that we did?
It was the visualizations, really. Like that was not something that I had ever explored before. As I said earlier, I considered myself very much to be a skeptic in the energetic realm, but when we were doing the grounding exercises and working with the golden light and having it go through the body, and I could feel when it was getting stuck in places, and I could feel when we were working with the breath to release that stuckness, and I could really see, like, I just discovered that I had such an active visual mind, that when we were doing those exercises, like, I was just able to leave my body for a while while we were doing those things, and just exist in that third space while we were doing those exercises. And I think that that was really helpful to me. And I did use the recordings that you would send to me as well to kind of revisit some of those places, as well. But yeah, like, the visualizations were just so new to me and so helpful to me as well.
I'm so happy to hear that. The capacity of the mind, it's like a capacity of our mind that we don't utilize a lot in our daily rhythm. And so being able to tap into it and use it is quite incredible. You hit the nail on the head. Like, you now know what it feels like to tap into the mind body, and you can feel like in the body when something just isn't right, being able to have the awareness, and so that you're not moving through life in a way that's not for you, right?
Yeah.
And especially as a mom, like, it's, you have this little one who lovingly needs you a lot, right? So being able to like do that, but then also honor yourself and like
Yeah.
have that space and awareness is really nice. Would you recommend my services to others?
I would absolutely recommend your services. I did hesitate for a while. Like, I don't think I've even told you this, but I, thought about reaching out to you for like at least a month, if not a little bit longer, before I actually like pulled the trigger and, set up the one-on-one consultations with you. But in the end, it was so, so worth it. It was so helpful for my mental health during that time period. The other free resources that you offer were also super valuable to me, like the fertility support circle, and the online resources and stuff like that. Yeah, I absolutely recommend working with you, especially one-on-one if you can swing that, because the work that you do to explore yourself and to get to know yourself a little bit better through this journey and beyond, I think is just invaluable.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think that the thing that I kept coming back to when I was on my fertility journey was that so often I felt like I was wandering through this desert, and every single month I would see the oasis ahead of me, and I would just like, run full barrel towards it and it would fade away every single month. And that was such a disheartening experience. But reaching out and getting the support that you need can make that oasis stay and you can get there finally. But ultimately, as I have started to share my own experience with others, and I don't think that I would have been necessarily brave enough to share my experience as widely as I am without having worked with Jess. But in sharing my experience with others, I have found that so many times people are just telling me, oh, yeah, I was there too. It took me 5 years, it took me 2 years. I had to go to Mexico for IVF, like all of these different stories that have come out since I've started sharing my story. And so ultimately, if you are still kind of plodding along in the darkness, wandering through the desert, whatever metaphor you want to use, you're not alone in that journey. And I hope that you can find the bravery in yourself to share your story, because you never know who might share that story with you as well.
Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of the Her Fertility Podcast. I am so grateful you're here. If you found this episode valuable, then I'd love for you to join me on the next one. Share it with a friend and rate the episode with a 5-star review so that the podcast can reach the women who need it most. If you have any questions about what you just heard, please connect with me on social media at herfertility.support. Find the right type of support for your fertility journey in the show notes below.